We are probably gonna still need to be admitting people, but I think we should get started because the Vision Zero team has a long, relatively long presentation for us today. But before we get started, we are now doing public comment at the beginning of all of our meetings. So I'll just open up the floor to anybody who wants to provide any public comments on regional operations and safety. Going once, going twice. Okay. No public comments. All right, so I'm just gonna turn the floor over to Alex Cohen from Cambridge Systematics to get started on their presentation and share the screen.
Hey, good afternoon. I'm Alex Cohen with Cambridge Systematics. Also joining us from our project team here today is Corey Hopwood. We have Matthew Rowe. We have Monica Paul and Siobhan Terrell. For everyone else, it'd be great if we could go around the room and also do some introductions too. Andrew, can we start maybe in the corner with you?
Sure. Good afternoon. I'm Andrew Tracy from the Capital Region Transportation Council.
Howard Goebel, City of Albany. Mark Castiglione with the Regional Planning Commission.
Robert McHugh with Colony and Muscle.
Matthew Rowe with Santec.
Alex Cohen, Cambridge Systematics.
Carrie Ward with the Transportation Council.
Corey Hopwood with Cambridge Systematics.
Parker Morris, Transportation Council.
Ethan Townsend, Transportation Council.
Adam Marshall, Transportation Council.
Great, thank you. And also online.
Ethan Warren from CDTA.
Devon Terrell, Cambridge Systematics.
Hi, it's Monica, also from Cambridge Systematics.
Peter Knudsen from Schenectady County Engineering.
Andrew Sadinger from NISDOT.
Kelly Kircher from NISDOT.
Adam Kane from NISDOT.
Thank you. Make sure we share the presentation.
Looks good on my end.
Okay, great. Okay, this on our screen. Hey everyone, as part of our updates of the Vision Zero Safety Action Plan, want to give a couple of presentations about some of the work we've been developing related to systemic safety analysis, where we're at with some speed safety assessments. We have a couple of discussion items. We really want to provide a couple of frameworks for everyone. Take kind of a big picture view as we're going to look to fill in this work as part of our overall process. And we have some updates to us, a lot of local coordination that we have coming up in the next 2 months. Starting off with systemic screening.
Yeah, so for an update on the systemic screening process, I wanted to share with you all kind of the purpose of this first off, but the systemic screening is a little bit different than what we've been doing on the priority location or investigation side of things, or we were trying to find those hotspot analyses or those locations that needed to be addressed reactively. The systemic screening is going to go through the network and help us determine which locations need to be addressed proactively. So looking at these very specific focus crash types, specifically in New York, typically look at intersections, roadway departure, speed, and pedestrian as our focus crash types. As key crash types that are likely to result in more severe injury results, so our fatalities and serious injuries, which we really want to focus on as part of this plan. Once we have determined those, we move on to determining our focus facility types. So through a set of crash tree diagrams and tables that I'll share with you today, and then I can share also following this meeting. We can see where there's an overrepresentation on specific facility types for these specific crashes. And those will be different for each of the four. And then once we've determined our focus facility types or the types of locations most likely to see these fatalities and serious injuries, we'll move into risk factors and things that make those types of locations inherently more likely to see a fatality or serious injury crash. So I'll give some examples of those as we move through that. And then after we have those risk factors noted and the focus facility types figured out, we screen the network backwards to determine the number of locations where we would need to implement systemic improvements or usually low-cost proven safety countermeasures to address a very large portion of the problem at hopefully a very small subset of our network. Next slide. So looking at intersections as a key example, I want to direct your attention to the first few columns. So you can see the first few columns are really determining that focus site type. We're focused on intersection crashes specifically when looking at this table, but for those first few columns, we have if it's urban or rural, the type of geometry at this intersection, and then also the traffic control, so that we can get an understanding of the focus facilities and the different ones that are available to us. From there, we're moving into the number of intersections that look or match that focus facility type. Very few in the case of a lot of these, but you can see that even though it's only maybe in this first example in the first row, only 8 intersections match this focus facility type. It actually makes up 456 crashes, which is a significant portion for the number of locations we're considering. And then the columns after that are all really trying to turn these crash issues into more of a rate-based calculation. So you'll see we have a calculation for determining the percentage of crashes or crashes per intersection in the last 2 columns. Or probably where you should focus most of your energy. When looking at the intersections, we have crashes per intersection to try and determine that overrepresentation of intersection crashes at this focus facility type. And then we also have our fatal and serious injury crashes per intersection to determine if there's an overrepresentation in those more severe crashes at this focus facility type. So in most of the cases, we've ranked these where those last 2 columns are really the key filter, key sorting mechanism. And we'll draw your attention more to that when I share these back out, but this is the beginning of that systemic analysis. So if we were to determine that we want to focus in on this top row, the urban 5 or more leg intersections that are signalized, we would go out and then determine if there are specific risk factors at these signalized intersections to decide and then determine what improvements would hopefully address those risk factors throughout the entire network. And so while there are 8 intersections that fall into that category in this example, there might be a couple of those that don't have any existing crashes or don't have any fatal and serious injury crashes. But even though they don't have that historic issue, we know that they have characteristics that are likely to lead to future fatal and serious injury crashes. So we would like to address them as part of a proactive systemic rollout of countermeasures. So that's an example with the intersection list. Alex, if we go to the next one, I think we have some more specific examples on speed. Same thing here. We're looking at a small subset of the intersections that are contributing a larger portion of the problem than they should be based on the population or the number of those intersections. In this case, the 2 that are at the top in terms of crashes per intersection or fatal and serious injury crashes per intersection are our rural intersections that are signalized. And then we also had, from just a crash per intersection standpoint, some of the urban roundabouts popped up. We do know inherently sometimes roundabouts can lead to more crashes, but you can also see in that example in the second row that the fatal or serious injury crashes per intersection is significantly lower than the first site type that we're considering. So we'll move through these and we'll probably pull a couple out of each of them to determine what the solution would be for these. But again, we're looking at a large chunk of the problem being addressed with a small subset of the actual locations. Speed, we'll also want to look at segments specifically because that's where we have a lot of the overlap with our other emphasis areas. Where we have unsafe speeding, we often have on segments, we often have roadway departure and other issues that lead into severe crashes. On this one specifically, there's a significant overrepresentation for both crashes per mile and fatal or serious injury crashes per mile. You'll see that now we've moved into segments, we're considering the actual mileage of that focus facility type instead of the number of intersections. So we were able to normalize by that relative mileage for that facility type. And even though this, in this case, that first row, the arterials on the interstate or other freeways are significantly less mileage than say some of our local roadways, they have significantly more crashes. But I also want to focus our attention on the things like, you know, the minor collectors just under that one, where there is less mileage, and we have actually still a significant number per mile of fatal and serious injury crashes. So we're going to determine that overrepresentation and determine risk factors at those types of locations again to address with specific countermeasures. And we'll share some of the specific risk factors for each of these after I get through some of these tables here. Next slide. Pedestrian, a little different than the intersections we were seeing before, but still very focused on obviously the urban side of things where we have those higher pedestrian and non-motorized volumes. Again, rising to the top of this one, we're seeing more crashes per intersection and more fatal and serious injury crashes per intersection at those signalized intersections that maybe have 5 or more legs, the more maybe confusing geometrically laid out intersections in these urban circumstances. Where, you know, we have more legs, there's likely some skew, and the crossing movements might be harder to see as you're making those turning movements for the motor vehicles. Next one, pedestrian segments, slightly different, a little more focused on the arterial side of things, where again, we have those high volumes of pedestrians, but have also some higher volumes of motorized vehicle traffic as well that could be leading to those increased numbers of crashes. The fatal or serious injury crashes per mile seem relatively low in this case because it's, you know, pedestrian crashes are somewhat random or spread out, so it's tougher to capture that. But from a crashes perspective, we're getting a pretty good, I would say, sample size on those crashes, just crashes per miles as well for this one. And then roadway departures, similar to the unsafe speed condition we were looking at before. We have some of those locations popping up on freeways and interstates, not really to anyone's surprise, but also on the not freeway arterials in the rural locations too. We want to make sure we're touching on those as part of the proactive analysis. This was part of the conversation we were coming up with the reactive locations before. While some of these rural arterials might not have clusters of crashes that would have led us to them in the hotspot analysis, this is where they're going to show up, is in this more proactive consideration when we go after, all right, where are the particular risk factors on our rural routes, on these rural arterials? And that's going to lead us to things like curves and minimum shoulder widths, where we're going to have to go back out and say, all right, we need to address those countermeasures specifically in a more proactive and network-wide implementation. And I think after that, we have a list of the general risk factors we'll be looking for in each of these categories. Like I mentioned with roadway departures, ADT might be a component of each of these. It's often a good way to help break this up and get an understanding of the context that we're dealing with. But in terms of real risk factors, looking at things like shoulder width, shoulder type, and speed limit for roadway departure, as well as the speeding crashes that we'll be looking at, or speeding locations we'll be looking at. Those will all be key risk factors, and likely the countermeasure will be set up to address each one of those bullets as we determine that correlation. Any questions on how the systemic analysis differs from what we've been doing with the priority location and hotspot analysis?
Just curious, same time frame of injuries or crashes?
Yes, still looking at the last 5 years of crash data.
Did I hear right that the per intersection metrics are calculated using only the count of intersections that actually had a crash, not counting the total count of intersections?
The count of intersections in those previous tables is the count of all the intersections that match that site type.
Okay.
So it'll include ones that do not have crashes. And when we roll out the systemic countermeasures to address them, those intersections that didn't have crashes but match those key risk factors would still be addressed.
Okay.
That's really the whole point of the systemic analysis, to make sure we are addressing locations that have the risk factors that lead them to be likely candidates for future fatal and serious injury crashes. Because in a lot of these cases, especially when we're dealing with the roadway departures, well, really any of these, roadway departures, speeding, and pedestrians specifically, we're looking at very small sample sizes that rarely cluster up. So they wouldn't get caught in the reactive analysis, but it's much easier to catch them in a proactive rollout of systemic countermeasures to address the risk factors, where that issue will likely slide to in the next 5 years when we start to look at it again.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, I think that's it for systemic.
Yeah, as we talk about the safety improvement program later on too, I think we'll see that. As we have a palette of options, or not one, but multiple palettes of options. I think we'll see that that really kind of marries with this in a way that, okay, now we're identifying these areas with. Promise, so these are sites of promise for systemic improvements. Here are the options that we can do, and we're gonna look to have things that are really highway safety improvement program eligible. So we're kind of helping to connect the dots with this analysis and curating those menu of options.
Is there any opportunity for an education program?
Yeah, so we're talking education too through here as well, and so I think we'll want to make sure we're dealing with we're finding and identifying the most needed education programs and what we can do to begin to scale those up. We certainly don't want to write recommendations like, oh, consider, an education program for this. I mean,
Understood, but it's nice talking about it, but it'd be nice doing it and actually having a motorist education program and a pedestrian bike. Maybe I see people just walking across. We had a near fatality on Madison Ave 2 weeks ago, and the light changed, and they could have went this way. So they went this way, right across Madison Ave, and never looked up and got clobbered. I watched the video twice, and I can't watch it again. They lived. Guy got out of the hospital 2 days later. The same person got hit. I mean, if I ever got hit by a car, I can assure you it never happened again. I looked both ways so many times, but on video, I never looked up once, and the stats really bear out poorly. Oh, geez, we have unsafe streets. The traffic engineering person in Albany must be really poor because this has happened. But when you look at the video, it's like, geez, how do we prevent something from happening that is fully avoidable? But we're not catching that group for some reason. There's an expectation. I know I used to go with my brothers in New Hampshire, and you step off the curb, you gotta be careful, you step up the curb, the traffic just stops. You do that in Philadelphia, you're gonna be legless, because it's just a different paradigm. And so how does pedestrians or motorists react to those varying paradigms?
Yeah, I think some of our education programs have been really bolstering safe routes to school programs.
Sure.
I mean, but yeah, as we look towards, certainly older driver, older system user education. So yeah, we're looking at, we know that I'm jumping ahead, but I mean, knowing, okay, the amount of people we have, I mean, where are some of the spots along this growth curve can we start to pick those up? So yeah, we'll be really keen to find where we can work those where those intervention points we can find.
If you're looking to align with the highway safety improvement eligible projects, maybe also with the governor's traffic safety committee education programs, since they seem to be keen on funding education to prevent pedestrian accidents. Driver education in New York.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think we just want to find where can we identify some inflection points for growth. Where do we want? I mean, we can just blanket 10% more, or where some spots that we can, and that's where, as we get into implementation, we can start to see, then there's a number for doing some more of this, and we can have some fun looking at even HSIP or other funding sources if we say it's a real commitment and need. Well, another aspect that we're working on right now is some of our speed limit assessments. And see, Albany has already taken advantage of their opportunity to reduce their citywide speed limits to 25 miles an hour. As part of this project, we were working with City of Schenectady, City of Troy, City of Waterville, and Green Islands for all, and Saratoga Springs. So I'm gonna let Matthew kind of explain a little bit of the process and methodology.
Sure. Well, thanks, Alex. Matthew Rowe at Stantec. I'll give the 30-second version first, which is that cities and villages can lower their speed limits to 25 as default speeds under New York state law. There's also been a change in the National Manual Uniform Traffic Control Devices that further supports that work. And we're developing draft reports to help these cities do that. So that they'll be able to simply, well, simply, I'll say in quotes, flip a switch. Implementation is part of it. So you can go on to the next slide. Cities across New York State have already set lower speed limits, and Albany was a leader in this, thanks to Albany. City of Kingston, New York, town of Brighton, New York, that we did the study for, and the villages of Tarrytown and New Rochelle have all done that. So the law requires an investigation, but doesn't say what that investigation is. So we're taking that seriously, but trying to do this in an efficient way, rather than since it is about area-wide speed limits, there's no requirement to investigate every single street. If we did that, we would be able, in theory, we'd be able to set the speed limit to anything, but that's not what we're really doing. So the work is actually grouping together similar corridors, similar streets, and using examples of local streets, examples of smaller one lane each way streets. Sometimes they're classified as collectors, sometimes they're classified as minor arterials. And then taking a closer look at anything that's a principal arterial or is multi-lane without simply including it in a grouping. Most of these cities only have one or two such streets under their control, so we're not going, so it's not too burdensome to do that in detail for those principal arterials. Okay, so speed limits have really evolved. The 2009 METCD manual and uniform traffic control devices said you have to study the free flow speed of traffic. You have to go get radar speeds or similar, and then recommended using the 85th percentile of existing traffic speeds, meaning how fast the 15th most aggressive driver out of 100 was going to set the speed limit, and to so basically you round the nearest 5, and that's what you should be doing. That led to speeds ratcheting up over time. Unfortunately, in some states are in an even more difficult position than we are in New York, where they were even required to use the 85th percentile under law. So the change at the federal level is that, and New York State's already adopted the 2023 METCD. The change at the federal level is you have to look at the context of the street for the roadway. Now, there is guidance in the METCD about how to do that, but what's noteworthy is that our study areas kind of all fall into the urban or suburban with some park and other kind of uses that are typically found in those settings, but they're not rural settings fundamentally for cities. So that already guides us in what to do. And yeah, you can go on to the next slide. So there is a layered approach, and we're inspired by, among other things, the City Limits Guide from the National Association of City Transportation Officials, which does recommend default speed limits, and then where necessary, slow zones or school zones, and then specific corridor speed limits. So this is something that in this case, we're really the first two categories, default and slow, kind of collapse into each other. And that's really one thing. And then we're looking at specific corridors, as I mentioned. So in the example of Schenectady, these examples comes to mind, where we're looking at local streets, we're looking at their one lane each way streets, and we're looking separately for corridor speed limits. We're looking at the higher speeds, the existing higher speed streets, things that are already set to above 30, or things that are multi. The basic idea is that the more, the denser the level of conflicts and the greater the level of activity, the more production of potential crashes there are, and the lower the speed you want. So you want, when we say conflict density, it's along a street and also within a street. So are there separate facilities for walking and biking? That lowers the density of conflicts. Are the crossing points controlled or uncontrolled? That lowers potentially the density of conflicts. But if there's on-street parking, that raises the density of conflicts. And so there's a matrix. This is directly from NACDO, but we can't. What the main point here is that NACDO recommends actually going down to 20 miles per hour in a lot of urban settings where there's a high conflict level and a high level of activity. And we are limited by state law, limited to 25. But it's worth noting that we're on a journey. We're in a process that, in many other cities and other states, as well as within New York City, there are 20-mile-per-hour zones. So that's something that we can think about as a study recommendation, not as recommendation to the cities, but as recommendation of a larger Vision Zero plan that 20-mile-per-hour should be permitted. Should be something that cities are allowed to do. So this is just a list of some of the specific sites that are getting further investigation. We're collecting pedestrian and bike volumes, and we've got existing motor vehicle traffic volume and speed data for these locations. Is just to show a sample of it. Within Saratoga Springs, there are a number of state-owned streets or state-maintained streets, and those are each getting their own sort of site investigations. I actually have a question because we've got Albany in-house. I would be very interested in hearing more about your process and especially about, well, process up to now and then how intensive implementation is going to be, because that's a question that other cities are having, is basically how much they need to spend. That's the third question.
It was surprising to us that, I'll start with the last thing that's forward, that as far as actually changing the signs, we're doing it all in-house, right? A few people. We purchase the signs, you can buy them, almost like on Amazon. It's nothing but order them, they're here in 2 days. Prices are, US, put in the requirements for the, and they show up. And I really think it was far right after, I think we passed the law in end of August. And I said, we can have this done in 2 weeks, but they approved it in January 1st. I'm like, January 1st, if I wanted it to comport to the school zone speed enforcement. Labor Day and the city's speed limit would be really good. So it'd be a lot of messaging around safety. And when we do just one, this is an opportunity of joining the two together, but guys go out and they figure they can do 50 signs per 2-man crew per day. And we have about 300 signs. So it's really not that much work to do, and it's taking the old signs off and putting the new ones on. We had a lot of signs that were, I'll call it non-necessary, legacy signs, so we just took them down, they're down already, before we even got the signs. So concern was, what if we put up a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit? But today, I'll largely go in effect till January 1st and work with our council to say, no, it doesn't go in effect until January 1st. And then taking the appropriate messaging, both with press and message boards to ensure that everyone's aware things are changing, so there's no misunderstanding, especially with the entry points, the dominant entry points. And going back to getting this approved, there's really leadership really from the mayor and some county council members who were equally concerned over the benefits of speed reduction on lowering frequency and damage of accidents. So it was pretty roundly supported throughout the city, and didn't really have any problem with Morris. We passed it now, implemented it. So, I think, something I thought was gonna be far more tough to do, ended up being a, pretty straightforward and cost much less than I expected. We were originally going to do the signs in front of ourselves, and we can't make the signs what we design. So
That's all good news.
I was hoping to, as New York City switches from 25 to 20.
Yeah.
I was gonna reach out and grab some of their signs. Because
Yeah.
they don't need 25, they got a lot of them, they
Yeah.
don't need them, and who wants to buy them? And I got a lot of connections there, and
We should start a
statewide marketplace. Yeah, no.
They're
Absolutely.
I bet they're recycling, they're reusing the sign, the aluminum itself and putting
Could,
something.
could be, I asked my guys, what would you do if you had this type of sign, and they said, we scrap them.
Huh.
The big problem is when you store everything.
Right.
It's just tough to have stuff that you need stored, but when stuff that you never use, and so it's difficult to, which again, I'm not a sign person, so I'm learning as that goes, but the cost to buy the new signs were very low. And, reason I say that we're within my buying purchasing threshold.
Yeah.
I didn't need to go out to bid, I didn't need everybody else to sign off for it, and it showed up in 2 days, so. All of that are real positive things that could allow even a small village municipality to go do this without being something that's, I would call it all that burdensome, and we have fresh new signs. And, pretty straightforward.
You said you had about 300 signs.
Correct. I think we had 425-ish, and we agreed not to put up whatever the balance was. Because of the, we call it unnecessary signs that were just posted, but we were on it, hit the, entrance points. Make
Right.
sure. What we did do is in our law was some of the routes that were going from a 50-mile-an-hour zone into a non-residential area, we agreed to keep that at 30. And, it's easy to say, just make everything 25.
Right.
But we went through a process, and so we do have probably 5% of the streets are maintained 30. Also, education regarding, it was troublesome because, we have streets that are under our jurisdiction.
Right.
Under state jurisdiction, and they're gonna maintain 30 miles an hour there. So it does create this, gap of, what should I do? And we really want to get our, messaging out there. I'm really thinking of like Central Ave, coming from Colony into the city, that everyone knows that there's a change. You go to the bridge and there's a change in it's not just a sign, but we want to have some EMS boards up there for a while to let people know what's going on, so there's no argument over. Right. The expectation.
Yeah.
That's gonna maintain 30 miles an hour there, I believe, up until past Everett Road, just as a.
Right.
And again, I could argue both ways.
Right.
When we do an analysis, what it does, is the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit does create some issues in our modeling of some of our queuing times and some of the speed, traffic, signals. And sort of our, pedestrian crosswalks, and, create some messes. Of timing, so we're working those out right now.
That's
It's not finished yet, it's in process.
Yeah, signal retiming, for clearance times can be a question.
And it comes with putting in left turn lanes. That don't exist, and how does that left turn lane, how do you deal with double parking? All sorts of things that are operationally challengeable, but we have a requirement like this is pretty straightforward. Bigger challenge is enforcement. No community is gonna say, oh, we passed a new law, and people are not gonna have new law enforcement people. So it's.
Yeah.
It's just a reality.
Not scalable.
Correct.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I hope for the other cities on the call, this was helpful, because hearing it from me is one thing, but hearing it from all the needs.
I will say this, that we implemented we're at 25% build out in our school zone, speed enforcement areas, and our contractor informed us that you're not gonna see a marked change in this for at least 6 months. takes a long time to change behaviors, and the analytics of the data demonstrate something to the contrary.
Yeah.
People are slowing down, and we've been monitoring areas that are in warning right now. And now, when we first did it, we had literally, like, the first day, unbelievable. I figured there were like 10,000 vehicles that were in warning. Now we're being in a new warning area, the numbers are low, so people are slowing down. I drive around and people are driving 20 miles an hour in school zones now. And ultimately, that's what we wanted. We want to change behaviors. It isn't a revenue driver for us. It's to change behaviors, and it seems to be working.
Yeah.
Hopefully it continues.
And everything I've heard about speed cameras confirms that the change can be very quick once they're out.
Yeah, the company who did it told us that was going to be the case because of they got systems all over the country. Because it really takes about 6 months before you see a difference. So, I got a warning to you. I don't, if you drove through those, it's tough. And I have my staff who have gotten tickets and say, hey, we're city vehicles, we should be exempt from it. Yeah, you're exempt. If you go over below 20, you won't get ticketed. You know, it's really that simple, and you're gonna pay the fine, you know, and it does create an issue, but we can't be expecting the public to do one thing and getting a pass. So it's been implemented system wide, and they too will adjust.
I know we're not into the safety program conversation yet, but it sounds like there might be some support for studying these locations after the new posted speeds have been in place and determining if they need additional self-enforcing road improvements from the infrastructure side that would help lower those speeds and behaviors. Since obviously it's tough to put in a strategy to increase enforcement capacity. But it sounds like that's already a great example of something that's working to help enforce that.
The one thing we have is something we would never have. You do a speed study and traffic study, and you do it and you walk away. Here we have constant daily data, which is really good for us to use some data analytics to see what is happening, not happening. Is there a temporal shift? Is there a difference between the morning commute versus the afternoon commute? And holidays and things like that, and the weekends. And so we're gathering a boatload of data beyond really our ability to really understand and appreciate. And just for the law enforcement side, there's a huge component of support that it's just not a computer saying, here's the bill. Someone needs to visually observe every single incident to make sure that it meets the requirements. So a citation can be issued. So it isn't just an easy system that runs autonomously. But the data is what I'm interested in.
Yeah. I'd be interested in the data too.
Yep.
Yeah.
Can you talk briefly on the corridor from Everett Road to the city line, town line? Is it the intention to eventually request the state reduce the speed there, or what is the governance of, it's not a city maintained corridor, but you still have a relatively similar corridor?
Yeah, that is actually a city maintained.
Okay.
We're actually gonna be out paving it next year. So we're gonna tip project from essentially Henry Jensen Boulevard up to North Allen, about halfway, going from North Allen to the Colony line. We're doing that on our own next year. In fact, it'll probably be done before the project will be done, just because we've done a great deal of work there on new sidewalks and curbs, and did a paving technology that didn't work. So that's why it's so bad. It's not very old. So we're gonna essentially redo what we're doing under current standards to get that, probably the worst street in the city. As far as the massive potholes there. We just need to define the limits on Everett Road, how far we go down Everett Road. We're probably gonna go to the Iron Bridge.
Did I mishear you? That is the 25-mile-an-hour starting at the city line of Entrada Boulevard, like the bridge? Is that where the corridor starts?
The corridor starts at the bridge, at the city line, but the determination based on our consultant and approved by the council and the mayor was to keep that 30-mile-an-hour until we get past Everett Road. It was a queuing issue. You get those traffic lights there, you're gonna back traffic up in a way that was gonna be problematic for the commutes. So we used analytics to establish what the clearly avoid the consequence of having just a mess. No, it doesn't, prevent us from making a change in the future.
Right.
But it was more or less from an outgrowth. We have a couple other places in the city where we did the same thing. However, there are some streets we don't have jurisdictions over, and those all are remain 30 miles an hour. So it's just not under our jurisdiction. The law doesn't give us the ability to make those changes, so it's an undesirable situation, but a reality of what we're dealing with. And I hope is that the whole idea of all the press work and the VMS boards and education would be that people would get the mindset to slow down. And, I've been driving on the New York State Thruway for the last 25 years, and I've been driving 74 since I took my job in the state back in 2000. And then I was passing most cars. You go 74 now, you're going slow. And so I need for speed or whatever, how that saying goes, people are going faster now than they ever have. And but I do see the changes now. Now that they're doing work zone camera enforcement there, people are slowing down to 55, they're slowing down to 45, which is just interesting. And people got enough tickets, I guess, or warnings, to say, hey, I don't want to get ticketed again, so they're slowing down. And in reality, we're talking actually 10 seconds, 20 seconds in your commute. This isn't something that is beyond one's ability to deal with. I think there's unintended outcomes that I think are positive when you implement such a program, which could be viewed initially as being somewhat this will have no impact. Right? But we're actually really seeing those impacts. And but as I mentioned before, it does create some real logistic issues with the queuing and the signal timing. So we're trying to make the crosswalks more productive for pedestrian traffic. So we're having longer times for a crosswalk during rush hour, and with the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit, it doesn't give you enough time to get through the next series of lights on Central. So it's making it rather difficult for us. We're looking at doing a road diet there, going from 4 lanes to 2. So we're losing essentially 2 lanes of a parking lot to queue traffic. And so those things all need to be taken into consideration without what our recommendation is going to be. And there's no easy answer. It's a whole host of undesirables. But we're hoping something that works.
Hopefully a safer solution for everybody.
Well, I think so. I think so. And it's an issue of people are gonna have to understand that maybe it's gonna take a little longer to get home or get to work. So plan accordingly. We go a little early. We need carpool instead of driving alone. And if we implement something as august as the 787 realignment, we really need to look at what the consequences of removing an interstate highway is the city's traffic, especially during those critical commuting periods, and where's the traffic going to go, and what unanticipated consequences would something like that create. So it's a big issue.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I definitely appreciate the rundown, because this is the first city in the region that's done a 25-mile-per-hour change, and it's the first city in the region that's Albany's also the first to do school zone speed cameras. So anyway,
It's been seamless, I'll say. The biggest challenge overall is getting National Grid to get power to our sites.
Yeah.
And it was finally tough to get in touch with somebody, and one of my best friends happens to be living with the general counsel. And not in this area, and I just have to mention it to him, and I get a phone call from her. And I said, the reason we're good friends is because I met her first 25 years ago. And she's, what do you want to do? I need someone to call.
Right.
And we go and file all these tickets and they get lost, they get rescheduled, they get delayed, and that just can't happen.
Yeah.
And so she made a few phone calls, here's who your contact is, and now they're done the day that you make the request. And I remember.
Well, you heard it here first. I don't think I have any more slides after that. Okay.
That's it.
What's that?
That's it.
That's the end of that, right? Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Cindy.
Hey, everyone's been quite excited on that topic, and
Yeah.
it's been a laboratory, so it's, so much has been done even since we started proposing this. Next, we want to have a discussion about some of the policy and process changes. Provide a little bit of an overview, and then can have Monica from our team jump in and provide some of the best practices, and feel free to jump in and ask any questions as we go here. This is something that's, as we look towards creating a Vision Zero culture, roadway safety management process, what we're looking to do is kind of take a look at some of the overarching policies, identify the processes that support it, and then really give way to the projects and programs that really help make a difference on reducing fatal experience crashes throughout the region. So we want to kind of talk about what are the policies, what do we want to really target with this plan, what's been done so far, where do we go from here? I think as we get into some of the processes, we're gonna look at some of the best practices, New York State and nationally. Certainly my newsfeed keeps on filling up with so many different pilots and things that are happening, everywhere, particularly coming out of this area. I had to subscribe to the Times Union to keep up with you guys. And develop safe system approach driven recommendations for where we're going to make sure that we're really making really approaching these through our safe road users, safe vehicles, safe speeds, safe roads, and post crash care. That I don't have the Swiss cheese diagram in there too, but making sure that we have those interventions that can prevent or crashes, or if they do, reduce their severity. So overall policies, what we really kind of have is top of the Vision Zero is fostering that commitment. We want to make sure that the responsibility is shared, and that this policy, be looking at creating a regional policy, but that's something that also really has roots through what locals are doing and supported by that as well. Then we establish leadership through the NPO, through local governments as well. And then other agencies can continue to recognize and support as well. We want to make sure this policy is translatable to what others are doing, that helps guide future plans and programs as well. And then hopefully that the safe system approach and the Vision Zero and the vision of zero fatalities and serious injuries really becomes a central focus of how we plan to operate the transportation system in this region. So I think we're really talking about really two key policy areas. And I think, and as we get through this, we may see some things in our policy program, policy processes and programs, kind of across those P's, we may get a little blended. But really, today we've had a lot of complete streets policies, particularly at the local level. Some New York State, a number of local jurisdictions have done those as well. And that, Vision Zero policy, we think that they're not conflicting, but they really kind of do intertwine nicely, complement, and build toward, mutually support one another. And included in some of these bullets are a few of the deliverables we're going to be developing as part of the project, the regional Vision Zero resolution, a template for your local jurisdictions to move forward with as well. So it's applicable to counties, towns, villages, and cities. And for complete streets policy, we want to promote some process recommendations as well, really using the safe system approach and using a design hierarchy to help kind of reinforce how we move through the complete streets design process. Our team conducted a scan of some policies. Really, where we are currently is that, yes, New York State has adopted a goal of zero fatalities and serious injuries through the Strategic Highway Safety Plan. New York State has the Complete Streets Act. Currently, right now in progress, we are developing the Vision Zero Safety Action Plan. The Police Chief's Design Guideline is an invaluable and excellent resource. That may not exactly be a policy, but really provides a lot of the support and guidance to how we want, jurisdictions and facility owners should go about considering and including facility, accommodations in their roadway projects. And then the template for the Vision Zero policy, and just to the right are the 8 jurisdictions that have complete streets policies enacted. So really excited to see the Vision Zero side of the ledger begin to fill up as well in the coming year. And really to support kind of the Vision Zero resolution is just not going to live on its own. So really think there are a couple of 2 key pieces of that help make it a living, breathing initiative and effort. One being, the coordination. Who's going to be kind of the day-to-day leadership of it, and 2, the overall collaboration of everyone. Folks we see around here, folks that we've been having stakeholder groups with, the traffic safety boards and others. So the Vision Zero coordination, we think this is really an agency staff responsible for the overall management of the Vision Zero effort. Someone who's going to carry out, leading the implementation of the Vision Zero Safety Action Plan, not necessarily sponsoring and implementing every project, but really carrying the torch of the goals, vision and recommendations that are included. Continue to facilitate, the Vision Zero task force, and promoting cooperation, members here, other jurisdictions, reaching out, supporting TSBs. Make sure that, promotes transparency through the reporting of annual performance measures, accomplishments. We will be having an implementation annual report as part of this, making sure that we're going out there and tracking how we're doing year over year. And someone who can represent this region at a statewide level. I know we have statewide folks on the call right now. That's been a great asset. So something the Transportation Council has done better than other regions in the state. But someone who can help interface and kind of translate, be that intermediary between some of these statewide initiatives and what that means for local partners. And the Vision Zero Task Force. I don't know if there's ever a point where any Vision Zero Task Force out there has said, "Oh, we've covered everyone." I think it's an ever ongoing challenge. Not a challenge, but goal to really bring in more people. I'm working on these projects. I'm always surprised the amount of people of different disciplines, communities that have an interest, vested in, sincere interest in safety. So how do we bring them into the fold? How do we bring their energy, their resources, their connections, towards pursuing our goal? And, that may be, it's probably a conversation with this group and some of the others of, is this one group, is this sort of a constellation of other groups? What works best for this region and some of the different groups that already exist. Every region is like a different solar system built on different ways. So, it's a conversation we're having.
Is there anything learned from those other regions and things that have worked and haven't worked?
I would say that traffic safety boards are a different flavor in every area. And so there's a lot of capacity there. Having a operations and safety group like this, having folks from post-crash care, and emergency response, working in the Buffalo area right now as well. Haven't met too many of those folks. But they also have a big operations center too. So sometimes there's different hubs of where you're going to try to focus and maybe cover some of your different bases across the 4 E's of engineering, education, emergency response, and enforcement. So And maybe there's different opportunities at different times of year to bring people together and have that cross pollination as well, so. It's just trying to build upon those and have. To understand where those opportunities are. And just. Build that kind of heads up, playmaking mentality.
One area where I think this region is actually is putting on more of a best practice than the other regions that we've worked with on this type of Vision Zero effort is having that community advisory group and these ambassadors as part of the effort. As this moves into implementation, and having those groups input is something that I think a lot of regions are still trying to figure out how to get all of the right people in the room from those particular groups. Where this is pretty started with that outreach and engagement. So that's been kind of nice. And seeing that continue into implementation, I think we'll see major benefits from having their input throughout that.
Well, today, the AARP had a presser at Henry Johnson Boulevard in Washington Ave, so it was kind of interesting to see the all the stuff that we've been doing here culminating into all that support for having safer streets, safer pedestrian walkways, and that's the worst street, that's the worst intersection in the city. And really, the mayor told me aside after, so we need to come up with a way to fix this location. It sounds simple, but it's not, for a variety of reasons, and including that the public pedestrian just across the street. Not at a crosswalk, not when it's safe or unsafe, just walk across the traffic's gonna stop. They won't hit. And when they don't, it works. One of the real things I think we miss a lot when we do traffic studies is we don't account for near misses. When there's an accident, fatality and stuff, boy, it makes it right to the top of the list, but those near misses, the difference between it being an incident and not, or an inch maybe, but. And we really need to be cognizant of the fact that I see when you do a comparison, from 2023 to 2024, the data look good. Well, they may look good, but I don't think they look good. And I still think it's incumbent on all of us here to ensure not only that we have a zero fatalities and serious injuries, but we make sure that it is not because we got lucky. But we really have a system in place that's going to comport to the needs of what's going on out there, not just living in that luck bucket.
Yeah, I think that outreach to these groups has been, very helpful for us to pinpoint different things that we're looking at, on our desktop and our maps. So, yeah, I think having that middleweight outreach has been invaluable. Probably been cost effective for us too.
I should mention, I think that intersection is on, actually, that intersection is on our list of safety investigation list. I started out calling them highway safety investigations, but I was calling them street safety investigations or just safety investigations. And so I went and checked it out, and anyway, it'd be great to coordinate further on that. I know, we have 11 locations within the city of Albany, which obviously we can't, we won't do as deep dive into all of them, but if that one that's on the mayor's agenda, then that's something we should take a look at.
What I'm trying to do now is model taking 787 out, and what's the impact on Henry Johnson Boulevard, which is already backed up through I-90 every morning. And so you would add that more traffic into that. How does that impact an intersection like that? It's gridlock.
We could talk about some other frameworks that we have too for kind of, have some, whether there's real traffic crash modeling, or we can talk about some safe system alignment frameworks too to kind of help that discussion.
Hey, everyone, it's Kelly from DOT Region 1. I'm just curious if any of the municipalities that have implemented the 25-mile-per-hour speed limit are planning to do or have started to do any sort of after study. We tend to fall back on the logic that just switching out a sign doesn't mean people will change their behavior. Certainly speed cameras, that'll, that is a very effective way, I would imagine, to do that. But I'm just curious if there will be after studies post implementation of those changes. Do you guys know?
Kelly, are you thinking crash or speed?
Either or, Carrie.
We are considering, it's Howard again from Albany, we are considering working with a vendor who has, they're not the only ones, but other vendors have similar technologies. Who can come in a very, like, in a day, put up a camera, it's all battery powered. And run it for 24, 48, 36 hours and get real data and then move them around from various points. And the data gained is far more valuable than the cost. Just to see, and I think it'd be really good to be able to compare the pre and post to see if this traffic is actually truly slowing down or not. Because I agree, just by changing the speed limit doesn't. It really comes down to enforcement, and I'm sure if we, like I said, we have a school zone 20-mile-an-hour speed limit without enforcement, it would result in a far different outcome than having citations written that really hits you and changes behavior. So we'll let you know as we get moving forward with the program too.
Yeah. Thank you, Howard. Thanks.
Be great from a technical standpoint, or maybe even contract piggyback into.
Yeah, so it was amazing to me, the low cost with this information and standalone systems with companies who do this on a routine basis. So it's not like going to build a new mousetrap. It's use the one that works and we can demonstrate that capacity.
Along those lines, and while it's not the same exact Safe Streets for All, this is a component of the Safe Streets for All project that we have to create a dynamic speed sign network in real time to assist enforcement. So there'll be like LTE connected devices and be able to study if somebody sees their speed, does it cause traffic to generally slow to that speed? So
that's always a great tool. And I think those definitely do have a change in behavior when someone doesn't really, I use my cruise control. Problem is below 30 miles an hour, my cruise control doesn't work. So I get in the school zone. Now the new electric vehicles do. The gas ones, at least the ones I drive, don't have the ability to slow it down. So I'm a cruise control hog. I use it all the time. I can tell exactly how fast I'm going because I set the cruise. But when you're not paying attention, you really drift low, they drift high, and all of a sudden, wow, I'm going way over the speed limit or way under. So I think having that documentation of, hey, here's your speed is a real value to it. And I think it's an effective tool with many people to give them an idea of what's going on. And I think there's always a concern of when is this being reported?
right.
Is this being documented?
Is that a camera versus is that just local reporting?
So there may be a more cost-effective way to reduce speeds to a point where no one's getting ticketed by it, but it does change behavior.
In addition to some of the other best practices, we recommend updating the action plan every 5 years, kind of following the cycle of the strategic highway safety plan. And even considering some other local road safety action plans as well, if jurisdictions are interested in making safety planning really germane and focused towards others. Sometimes that value of just seeing your county, your city reflected and focused in the plan kind of has sense of ownership at stake and Vision Zero as well. So right now we want to kind of build on this overall tree. And this is really kind of a draft framework thoughts, just so we're not just having a series of kind of slides flowing from one topic to another. Really kind of within the Vision Zero policy, recognizing some of the aspects that kind of fit probably best defined as processes. So we'll talk a little bit about roadway safety management, complete streets, speed management, post-crash care, funding, and local codes. we're happy, you know, please let us know if we should frame these maybe some different ways, split these out, put some things into some different buckets. Maybe that's the plan on me, but kind of like, okay, where are we gonna start to put these into some sections? And we think that these are really some of the best processes, and probably underneath these will be programs that will like to, programs and other initiatives that will really kind of be as other, they would find themselves part of kind of an overall safety implementation program. You know, what we'll really like to have with that is really merging for the first time I know I'm jumping ahead of the agenda item by saying that, but bringing together programs and projects really under one holistic program. I'm bringing the two family trees of our DOT HSAC, our Governor's Traffic Safety Council, and really bringing everything together in a holistic way. But really thinking these are some of the policies and processes that really provide the bedrock and the foundation to making sure that we're able to execute those programs as well. And steer existing efforts into a more Vision Zero focus.
Under this, how would you define speed management?
I think we'll get into kind of some of the, we're looking at traffic calming, some of our automated enforcement. Yeah, it's kind of really some different aspects within that as well. And that's been an area of probably some of the most, certainly we'll see here has been the most innovation in the last year or two.
And then where does education fit into all this?
Yeah, and I think if we look at some of the, you know, strategies, you know, programs, and I think we'll look at having, you know, some of these will have strategies that do kind of fit across some of the 40s.
And we need to educate both adults and kids, especially at school zones, and it's tough. You put your earbuds in, get your phone in front of you, you step off the curb and expect not to be hit. And that's probably not a good expectation.
Yeah, no, I mean, so, yeah, even under the most generous kind of conditions.
Right.
And not to throw a whole other diagram on you guys, but as we look at, implementing the Safe System program, we do want to show that, this pyramid, which is kind of built on a public health framework, knowing that we'll have aspects of these that are education, some that are active measures, are signs, warning systems, latent system measures as well, things that are part of our vehicles, our hardwired infrastructure. Then otherwise, our capital projects are built environment. So kind of a different way of looking at some of these things that besides just exactly the 40s as well as engineering and enforcement. And so some of these are, I mean, and obviously socioeconomic factors are, you know, do play somewhat of a role in kind of how our built environment of, you know, how travel behaviors are shifted as well. But knowing that kind of with the Swiss cheese analogy of different layers, knowing we can't shoot an arrow through them, we'll see that there's each sort of different emphasis area has different approaches and different strategies that we can do to kind of fit along all of these that mirror. Those are far more individual effort and responsibility, and those that are sort of a more shared impact.
Can you just, what's the significance of the arrow on the right? Is that a decrease?
Yeah, that there's a greater impact in population health. So I mean, more underlying factors will have a greater shared. Yeah, that's great, Karen. We'll think about that one as, yeah, the population health is not declining.
No, yeah.
It's increasing with the direction of the arrow.
Increasing with the direction.
Yeah.
Further down is more bang for your buck, I guess, right?
Yeah.
We might put some red and green colors on there or something. Yeah, I certainly wouldn't want to recommend anything that decreases health. So we want to just highlight some best practices would have been out there, and really some of the roadway safety management. I think we'd look at NPO and maybe local well, MPO planning and programming, so what can we do to support, how we identify and program potential safety projects or aspects of safety within all capital projects. Then also thinking of, you know, along this, the sort of 6 steps of the safety management process. What can be done to bolster these steps as well? Maybe additional data collection, support network screening, finding some of the additional data points that we need to support other emphasis areas for vulnerable road users, curbs for roadway departures. Then going on and doing diagnosis. I know that's been, oh, why can't we spend more HSIP money on the local system? Some of that's been, you know, what can we do to go out there and support investigations, do road safety audits, go after and take that next step to identify and come up with countermeasures. And even some local road safety plans as well. So really kind of a series of, you know, additional things we can do to bolster what happens in here, finding some of the gaps and tune-ups to make this cycle even stronger. I'm gonna throw it to Monica on the call here to walk through some of the other best practices that she's helped identify.
Thank you, Alex. Yeah, I will be talking about some of the examples of the best practice recommendation that Alex talked about. First, we talk about like road safety management. In road safety management, there is project prioritization. So incorporating safety into the plans early into the transportation planning process, it helps in implementing traffic safety practices. And some of the counties and cities have already been doing that. One example is of Indianapolis MPO, which has included safety projects related to transit, active transportation or highway infrastructure. They have included those in their TIP programs, which is transportation improvement programs. Similarly, City of St. Paul is revising their capital improvement program and trying to include the safety projects into their planning process. Next slide, Alex. Talking about some of the best practices for complete streets, Harvard County has been awarded like a perfect score by National Complete Streets Coalition, and the policy does a great job in identifying the commitment and prioritizing the vulnerable road users. They also clearly define which communities are underserved and also commit to prioritizing them in the project prioritization process. And similarly, City of El Paso has like a great complete streets policy, and they have also like build upon the goals that which city established like over a decade ago on the Vision Zero principles, and they focus on improving roadway safety, improving public health, and reducing emissions. Next slide. To support the complete streets policy, there are complete street design guidelines or New York's or street design guidelines, and several cities have their own street design guidelines. One is for City of Hoboken. They have adopted a street design guide, which provides like a toolbox for implementing Vision Zero. Then the City of St. Paul, they have a street design manual, and they are like updating their manual to incorporate the Vision Zero commitment. Similarly, New York City has a New York street design manual, which provides guidance to decision makers and also inform stakeholders. Next, talking about speed management, Matthew has already touched upon like reducing the speed limits, and City of Albany has already reduced the speed limit. And similar to Albany City, there are several other cities all over the country who have reduced the speed limit from 30 mph to 25 or 20 mph. New York City has reduced the speed limit to 20 mph on some of the streets. City of Hoboken has reduced the speed limit to 20 miles completely the citywide. And Boston MPO has reduced speed limit to 20 mph recently in Cambridge City, in Boston City as well. Looking at some of the other speed management practices, we can do speed limit reductions in school zones. We can put speed monitoring displays in the areas, and another is automated enforcement. In automated enforcement, these automated enforcement devices can be placed in work zone areas or school zone areas, or at red lights, or even at bus in the buses as well. There's some guidance outside, available outside the New York State is Connecticut. They have issued a guidance for municipalities to implement these automatic traffic enforcement safety device, and they provide guidelines on how to install these devices at the red lights or the school zone, pedestrian zones, etc.
Yeah, and IHSS has, and also another checklist too of kind of how we roll these out, timing, communications, how to manage, the enforcement as well.
Right. Moving on to the post-crash care. Post-crash care is one of the elements of safe system approach. So there are some countermeasures and recommendations available at the federal level. One is FICAMS, which is Federal Interagency Committee for Emergency Management System. They provide several recommendations on how to improve the availability and quality of EMS data, how we can improve the access of these personnel during the post-crash care. And there are also some new strategies out there, such as pre-hospital blood transfusion, which is providing blood immediately to the victims and which has helped in reducing the serious injuries and reducing the fatalities as well.
Annika, I'll just add to that last bullet, pre-hospital blood transfusion being approved in New York State this year.
Okay.
The approximate cost is about $1,000 per unit. So I realize that each of these might be one area to look at, but certainly a funding mechanism under each of these would be equally as important.
Right.
So looking at some of the additional funding sources we can do to support each of these bullets.
Yeah, Medicare CMS has approved in January 2025 reimbursement for basically allowing us to upcharge maybe $100 for a Medicare type patient, and the actual cost of a unit of blood transfusion is $550 for the blood, and the disposals are about an additional $500. So it'd be interesting if you're going to do a report to mention or quantify what the implication is on a system to actually have access, let alone the logistics behind cycling that blood out every 2 weeks.
Right.
Certainly a national trend, and excited that we're able to push that in our region.
But we're lacking the reimbursement rates for, to be able to really support some of these best practices.
Thanks.
No, that's great to know.
Yes. Yeah, Alice, you can go.
Oh, and yeah, I think we're coming to funding as well. I mean, that, Robert, tee this up. And, you know, as part of the process too, of funding as part of through the overall Vision Zero effort, you know, maybe through that coordination, providing a central source of all safety funding opportunities, resources. I think once you start to get into some of the bottom of the bullets of eligibility, you do see that some fund sources do get to cross over, and that's what gets it be interesting. And also supporting jurisdictions through some of these complicated processes they don't seem to go through all the time. Possibly assisting collaborative funding applications through GTSC and other program implementation. And, you know, pursue some new innovative funding opportunities, including maybe looking at utilizing what may come through some of the revenues through some of the camera programs. I know in Rowe County, they're kind of supporting some of their local initiatives, some of the seed money. That's some of that's very new, and I think, but I know that's supporting some of the planning, some of the other programmatic efforts. So kind of where some of those local initiatives may not fit quite at branches here. And local codes as well, you know, site development is a great opportunity to work on some of that. And similar to what NISAT does for SafeTap, utilizing 1R preventative maintenance and even not capital maintenance projects as well, to working in different systemic safety improvements.
And adding one example to that one, like incorporating safety into the regular maintenance. We all know City of Hoboken has seen no traffic deaths in the past 7 to 8 years, and they have been like achieving these. They were able to achieve this goal by incorporating safety into their these incorporating these small safety improvements every time the street is being repaved. So block by block, they were able to daylight like some intersections. They were able to paint high visibility crosswalks and also do curb extensions. So these small efforts goes a longer way.
Absolutely. So, a big effort on top of just, ADA. No, we're kind of getting close to time, but want to see if there's any, additional policies, or processes that we're kind of missing, in our landscape. Any major barriers or any other things you want to throw in the mix?
Well, I'm from Kingston. I follow my friends from high school. And I think the efforts to implement their speed limit and associated safety measures is getting conflated with the broad liberal conspiracy. So just something.
Yeah, I think,
I don't think you need to come.
yeah. The limits as well,
Here's what
the
it
limits
is.
of data.
I think just one thing this doesn't really answer your questions, but for the things that you found that we in the region have done, and then looking at the best practices, I think it could be helpful to look at where what we've done doesn't meet what you're suggesting as a best practice, because those are probably things that we know we have support for here, and that it might be easier for us to improve on those things, in addition to doing things we haven't done yet, which you'll probably also recommend.
To echo Howard's comments about education being maybe one of the core policies or processes, I feel like funding should fall under any one of those, and maybe replacing funding with education. Do we have a comparison of all the different education programs that are in New York State and that are national, compared to like almost as an awareness for the internal stakeholders? Especially as you look at these analysis, it was like maybe 1 or 2 meetings ago, you got the analysis of causes of traffic accidents, and then the slices of the pie that were certain age demographics. So maybe we could align those causes to or a policy for the education getting refreshed, even just awareness of it.
See what I'm wondering here is like how there are more triggers that are coming to communities in cities that are actually walking the walk with the safety measures, where it's like, more funding distribution could happen to those areas and they could lead the charge in that matter, because they're actually implementing what is being planned and what is being there. So like, I don't know, I don't really see many mechanisms that are incentivize like a continuation of that, just because, yeah, I'm just commenting.
I think almost more centralized safety education is kind of a overall core repository, kind of similar leadership.
Yeah, what's the landscape of driver education? ARP may have programs for their demographics. Driver training schools have a curriculum, maybe through Board of Education. I think through DMV. Yeah. Then you've got GTSC with all their initiatives for pedestrian safety action planning.
Is there anyone focused specifically on Subaru drivers?
Mm-hmm.
What? Subaru drivers? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, yeah, is coordination and kind of off coordination is education. Like centralized kind of.
Yeah, I was just gonna kind of ask whether we're talking about education in a classic sense, or are we talking more about public information and
both
public information campaigns? Yeah, so I think that can be very, multimedia campaigns can be very helpful in, especially things like speed limit rollouts or changing attitudes around speed, or even just letting people know that is actually something we're doing right now. So I think I I'd probably elevate public information in this. I think education can sometimes, this is maybe semantics, but I think talking about education can sometimes lead us into like, you know, it's a class, we think of a classroom. On that topic, you brought up driver education and driver education schools. I think this is a tremendous area that, you know, I'm not going to say that it's not exactly a barrier, but DMV hasn't always kept pace with the needs of cities in particular in their education, and that could be something that we think about. They might be more inclined to listen to cities in their own region here.
I like the idea of public education / public information education, and really what's the incentive for each one of these? Can there be an incentive built in for municipalities that participate in public education? Like to your point, can there be an incentive to those that actually invest in all of the hardware and logistics behind a proper post-crash care system versus those that don't? And then tie it somehow to the funding mechanisms they're used to. Maybe there's a bonus funding through NISDOT or some other like larger entity.
WP task right there, or public education fund. I was just saying that NPO, the Regional Planning Transportation Council, would get out with stuff like that.
Yeah.
Previously, they had a program to provide training for streets. This could be something that we consider funding in the future. Limited to those cities who have implemented slopes and stick approach.
Yes,
Hi,
I know time-
everyone. It's Jen Hogan on the phone. How is
Hey, Jen.
everybody? I just want to say that we are public health and we are the third leg in the stool with NISDOT and GTSC. So we are the educators. We do have a CNBC tips for pedestrians, safety tips for drivers, a real extensive toolkit of resources on our website that we have been working on since the original PSAP was kicked off in 2016. And even though we don't have a PSAP 2.0 in place, we continue to build that toolkit of resources. And we even dug our heels into some focus groups this past fiscal year. And that was a data-driven approach working under NISDOT's VRU addendum along with GTSC's public participation and engagement, which is part of their strategic plan as well. So we were in the cities of Albany, Rochester, and Yonkers this year, and we work closely with Carrie Ward, and we're working with Bill Trudeau, in and around that. We were at the Albany High School. So these are some efforts that we are doing, and we're hopeful to actually build some further materials in follow-up, because these meetings, of course, gave us insight to outreach materials that we can develop for these demographics. So we are working tirelessly here at DOH trying to get into those targets, those demographics, to dig deeper so we can broaden and engage and get that education out to them. So I just wanted to fill you in on that briefly as we're speaking to education.
I think we talked about this. Does driver's ed doesn't basically exist in driver's ed in the schools?
Not at schools, inherently, no.
And do you get
It's definitely dwindled.
do you still get a discount on your insurance if you take the 5-hour course?
It's an online course.
Oh, it's an online course now? Oh, great.
I had a shortest meeting of my career. I was doing a position at night, 500 employees. One of the guys come in safety said, "Who's gonna take defensive driving?" The meeting's done, everyone. Well, it's 500 people. Okay, I'm gonna value you over another person. So I want everyone to take it, and it changed the whole safety paradigm of the organization, because people who thought that they were never at a stature where they would be rewarded by having paid for defensive driving, they weren't. It changed the whole safety aspect of, began to change the whole safety aspect of the organization, because it removed the haves and have-nots. And the most interesting thing is, I do this every 3 years because of this insurance deductions, but it's amazing what we forget. And it's nothing new, but we forget because we just don't pay attention to safety and the idea of, you know, speeding up to get through a light or this, that, how immaterial that is, but how you're putting yourself in harm's way all the time. So I think that, whether it's public information, education, whatever we call it, it really needs to be a cornerstone or a foundational aspect of what we're doing. And I think that also isn't limited to classroom instructions to have public safety announcements and things like that. Really a way to catch people in a different way than being forced to sit in a classroom. Everyone learns differently.
Hey, Carrie,
Yes.
I just had a question. One of the things that I've always talked about with you is that ADA transition plan that I love to talk about, but then I never do because I don't have any buy-in here. But I mean, for municipalities, it shouldn't, I mean, I'm trying to limit the amount of plans that we have from complete streets to Vision Zero to ADA, but I mean, they're all linked, right? I mean, they all are together. It gets very cumbersome to have a plan. We missed the boat with complete streets. Our attorneys keep leaving here, so we never have a ADA transition plan coordinator that knows what ADA transition plans are. And now we've got the Vision Zero plan. So I didn't know, you know, we showed that circle where Vision Zero takes over everything. And I'm just trying to, if we could get one plan, does the one plan, can it cover everything? Or is it still a whole bunch of different plans that need a whole bunch of different MPO, you know, studies and workshops and everything, because it's tough. It's tough to put it all together.
Yeah, I don't think we're gonna be able to combine the ADA transition plan with a Vision Zero thing. I mean, I think having accessible sidewalk means that, you know, somebody in a wheelchair is not riding in the street instead of on the sidewalk, but we need to do the condition analysis of all the pieces of infrastructure, all the pedestrian pieces of infrastructure, which is way beyond the scope of the Vision Zero planning effort.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean physically do it. I just meant like that same thing, that they touch on each other's topics. Like there's a lot of overlap. But
yeah, absolutely. I don't think we want to come in and just put our superstructure on over other diagrams. I mean, as much as I love making a good flow chart, Chris, you know, that's, yeah, hoping we try to say these are pretty complementary and we find those opportunities where, you know, we were showing where your pavement, you know, your 1R projects, you're gonna have to do your ADA, what safety projects can we do with that too? So, I mean, hopefully we try to make these things as overlapping and, you know, hopefully they kind of can engineer interfaces kind of together. But
okay,
yeah, I don't know if there's there's the plan, you know, that we get to come up with.
yeah, I guess.
So if you're having issues with that transition plan application, we can talk about that.
No, you know, we'll work on that. I guess I'm just trying to, with the limited resources that we have and all the requirements that are out there and, you know, everything that's going on with regards to even what we're learning or what we're evolving. You know, I worked on the PSAP plan, you know, back in 2016 and, you know, we're here now, but there's just so much that's happened and in between. And I don't feel like we've made a lot of advancements, but I know that we have. It's just because we don't have a lot of people to put these things together. And when it comes to pedestrian safety and bikes and education and enforcement, it's a little bit different for cities because we just have all the pedestrians and we have, you know, we are that urban area. But conversely, when I sat in on some, you know, local road safety things, you know, one of the biggest focuses is on roadway departures and things like that. And we don't have a lot of that, you know? So, you know, you sit in and you, oh my God, roadway departures are terrible. And it's like, well, you know, we don't have a lot of roadway departures because if you depart the roadway, you end up on somebody's lawn, you know, and it's a little bit different than going off and hitting a tree in a ditch. So I don't know, there's, you know, but at the same point, somebody at the county, their ADA transition plan, they don't have any sidewalks. They may own a signal. You know, so there's a lot I'm trying to digest here with this as you go through the Vision Zero. And if I saw on the list, you know, we're the only city that didn't have an approved complete streets plan. And that's just because, you know, we tried to get on board with these workshops and it just never lined up with us. So and then the same thing with ADA. So I keep feeling like Schenectady is always like kind of a step behind everything. as the steps keep coming, and I'm trying to right that wrong if I could.
That's great feedback, and hopefully with something with like Vision Zero, we've, creating a template that's replicable, and hopefully we are fitting into what's the regional goal, and yeah, as we look at some of these process, hopefully we are trying to coming up with some rough ideas of who can help lead. Certainly there's a, even for regions of about 1 million people like this region, there's only so many people who are going to take some of these different balls. So trying to find, where we can share responsibility, share effort.
Alex, it's Jen Hogan again. And to Chris's point about Chris being on the original PSAP, I just want to make it clear that, we, the state partners, are definitely resources that are available to you in this Vision Zero plan, because we do have a lot to share with all of you.
Thank you, Jen.
We're doing on time with the rest of your presentation.
We will hustle.
Okay.
I got like 5 minutes.
Yeah, this part will only take one. So the next slide here is really just touching on a lot of stuff that Alex has already mentioned. All of these different components, and Alex, you can go to the next one, just sort of go through it. It's pulling all the different things he mentioned into more like strategy areas. So we have our more reactive analyses. We have our priority locations that will get improvement packages or planned projects. We have the systemic proactive network that I talked about earlier. Those are going to get their own types of improvements as well that roll into this type of program. But here's all the other E's that Alex has mentioned. We got the enforcement, education, emergency. Each of those are going to get strategies under our various emphasis areas and those program areas that Alex already mentioned to address the actual issues. And they may have more applicability to one jurisdiction than another, but we want to build that base framework, that larger toolkit of here are the strategies for the region. There will be actions underneath of those individual strategies that then fall into what are the specific education programs that we should be considering. And that should also include the shared resources and funding elements that can help those folks that are tracking implementation or are responsible for implementation of that action figure out where they're supposed to look for those resources. To the point that was brought up, there's going to be overlap with other plans, there's going to be overlap with other efforts. And that's where we want to bring in those folks that are responsible for those efforts already, so as not to kind of diverge on how we go about addressing that specific action or that specific strategy. We have some specific things listed that might actually come out as more strategies or actions, like safe routes to school, safe routes to transit. And then we have an entire list of examples for each of these bullets in latter slides that we don't necessarily need to go through today. I think we can share those out following this meeting, but that is all to say that beyond just specific locations where we're doing speed limit studies, where we're doing highway safety or road safety investigations, or these proactive systemic locations, there are bolder, broader strategies that will be within the plan to address each of the emphasis areas that are determined by the region in general. And that'll give us an opportunity to address things that aren't just infrastructure as listed here. And I think the next slide just says more existing efforts that are already ongoing that will roll into that or be referenced as part of the strategies and actions in the implementation plan itself.
And really some of the systemic projects as well. I mean, taking some of the different systemic projects that have been and packages that have been approved in New York State, really bringing them together and into one combined resource. Working with our those that are eligible through the Volvo reviews or safety assessment, and also with FHFA proven safety countermeasures, which are also HSIP eligible. We're gonna curate some different packages, tie them to our systemic safety screening. So this really helps enable locals to go out and pursue these opportunities without that benefit cost analysis. That you can they're much more plug and play for what we need, and we can have that proactive step as well. And so talking about some of the things that we can do for some of the potential treatments, identify where the applicable locations are, and the planning design considerations of what the caveats will be. And so we're gonna develop these even further, kind of tie this to the screening. Really is probably a good profile page each in the final plan. So, mentioning the roadway departures, the speeding, issues. Intersections, so some of the four focus, crash groups that we mentioned earlier. Looking also at local streets as well too, kind of what we do to manage speed and some other issues there. Certainly in some of our cities, we did see some network screening show up of local streets. They're probably not worth corridor studies, it's hotspots, but really, apply some systemic treatments will help reduce the risk of crashes in those areas. And as we begin to kind of draft some of this program, we want to recognize some of the additional programs that have been out there. But also, as we look towards identifying key actors, not just regurgitating who's gotten highway safety grants through GTSC, but rather what we can, or saying, okay, let's just increase funding by 10%. I mean, is that it? What are some of the, where are some of the targeted inflection points where we can really see some of these changes in enforcement? What can we do to coalesce and around safe routes to school? As we're really probably one of our prime areas for education. We also need to take a look at some more older driver education as well. Recognize some of the, and we'll build on some of the best practices. Kind of safe routes to school is that is its own standalone program federally. It's kind of fell off in MAP 21, but kind of maybe really, but the memory of it still lives and the brand is still strong. So, how can we bring some of that recoalesce that back together? So, just I know we're kind of running out of time, but just so if folks have any thoughts on some of the categories, talk about some of the additional, any specific programs that, Alex, this is where we need to poke. This is where we need to put some of the fuel on the fire, the funding. Please let us know. And we'll follow up too. And so we're happy to have any additional conversations about where are some of those near-term opportunities. There are a few updates. Community engagement. Our teams met with a bunch of the traffic safety boards recently. And I think we're trying to look towards the next town of Colony one too. So I'll try to catch up with this one. Local coordination, we mentioned the street safety investigations that Madison seems to be doing, the speed limit studies. Kind of skip through all of these locations. We'll send those out as well. 41 locations that we're up to. And lastly, working on corridor concepts. For those of you who don't know, we are going to be developing planning level concepts for some of these locations, corridors, or some areas that turned into blocks, both around Saratoga Springs, Albany, and Waterford. At first, we're going to go out there and conduct a road safety audit. The street safety investigations happening right now, so we have that quantitative analysis, that crash. We want to have initial conversation through the road safety audit process, walk the corridor, look at some potential countermeasures and solutions, then really bring that some initial sketches and have some design workshops with the public. And so we're getting these on the calendar right now. So hopefully looking forward to coming out to each of the cities to meet with staff and key corridor stakeholders, then coming out to the public later next month and into January. So we will provide more updates to everyone as those get on the calendar.
Sorry,
No worries. Our active transportation geodatabase, just got a compilation of plans and studies. It's been reviewed and will be finalized soon, and so this link will be shared as well. And we have our next meeting as we get towards really the draft plan in January. Thanks, everyone. Great conversation today. Appreciate the time.
Anything else for Alex?
Yeah, we're hanging around.
Carrie, we have other updates, right?
Yes, we do. Yeah, so the January 16th meeting is gonna be basically like an additional meeting for us. On the agenda was the other dates, February 27th would be our normal, and then May 29th, August 28th, and November 6th. I'll send, Andrew probably will send those out as calendar invitations to everyone on the group following the meetings. That'll be all of next year's meetings. And then Andrew was gonna give an update on the tip solicitation.
Yes, and we had a slide on the in motion as well.
Yes.
But I'll give the tip update. We issued our solicitation for transportation improvement program projects for the next update of the transportation improvement program. Applications are due December 6th by 5 p.m. All the information is on our website. If you go to our front page, there's a banner you can click on to see the solicitation materials. There are 6 different applications. If you have any questions about which application to use or how to complete one, please reach out to me at any time. And once again, applications are due December 6th. So any questions, feel free to reach out to me.
Hey, Alex, just real quick, can you send out that invite for the site audit? I don't have it in my calendar.
Sure, yeah, Chris, I'll give you a call after this too. I think we just want to finalize the times for you guys.
Okay.
North Main Avenue site audit between Western and Washington. They installed a new stop sign recently. I have run the stop sign, probably more than I've stopped. Even though they have a number of different signs, so it'd be interesting to see the data on how many stop, that stop sign.
It's just here.
Well, I'll do it over and under. You do a percentage of the traffic volume for an hour. I would say 10 cars per stop sign. That's my wager.
Then the transportation planning solicitation, those proposals are also due on December 6th. That is for the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act transition plan work. And also for what we call our linkage program. So we're looking at, planning studies related to corridors and also zoning codes is, the relationship between land use and transportation, the zoning can be relevant. So we do those as well. And then finally, the In Motion, that's our new Metropolitan Transportation Plan's name, In Motion. Yeah, okay, In Motion 2050. We have already done 2 rounds of public input, and we have a vision statement that was approved just this past September. So next steps will be scenario planning, and we'll have a new survey out soon if it's not out yet. I think that's all we have. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.